Story 1. In late 2023, we saw the first ever approval of CRISPR-based medicine, Casgevy, a cure for sickle cell disease and transfusion-dependent beta thalassemia. Story 2. The new Euclid telescope is actively taking pictures of space and piecing them together to make a map of our night sky. It just finished the first set. Story 3. This one is near and dear to me. Cabozantinib, branded as Cabometyx, is a chemotherapy drug that may be a new treatment option for patients with neuroendocrine tumors. The Food and Drug Administration accepted a supplemental new drug application for cabozantinib in August 2024, with a target action date of April 3, 2025. The drug is intended to treat adults with well or moderately differentiated pancreatic or extrapancreatic neuroendocrine tumors that are locally advanced, unresectable, or metastatic. Story 4. Taiwanese chip manufacturing plants being rigged with explosives in the event of a Chinese invasion and the increase of United States Marines being deployed to Taiwan. Story 5. Griffith University, Queensland, Australia, is about to start human trials on groundbreaking research into regenerating nerves in spinal cord injuries. Story 6. We may have basically found a treatment for late-stage rabies. It has been working well in lab tests with rats. Similarly, we have found a possible treatment for age-related mental diseases, such as Alzheimer's, by reactivating certain healing factors in the brains of rats. And the scientists are confident that this should work in humans too. The era of people living to 120 or 130 is closer than you think, especially when you consider that in healthier countries like Japan there are record-high numbers of people living to be over 100. Story 7. War in Sudan. 50 million people were in Sudan before it started. An estimated 9 million people have been displaced, and today 750,000 are facing imminent starvation. For context, there are about 5 million Palestinians total in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. I'm not trying to diminish what's happening in Palestine, just to point out how little attention Sudan gets relative to the size of the human impact it's having. Story 8. A lot of people know, but I don't think people are aware enough that big tech companies get a pass on privacy invasions because the United States government can subpoena information from them that the government itself is not allowed to collect. I truly believe this is why the United States government is going after TikTok so hard, because they're afraid of China using the data from the app the way the United States uses data from Google, Microsoft, and Facebook. Also, if TikTok is forced to be sold to American ownership, then they join the American companies in collecting information from Americans and can be compelled by the government like the others. Story 9. Last night in a hospital somewhere near my city, a man was brought in for a broken spinal cord from jumping off a 2-story building to try to kill himself. He and his girlfriend had been in an argument and he stood on the balcony, threatening to jump, and then did. Obviously, he survived because a 2-story house is not tall enough to do the job. He proceeded to call his girlfriend from the hospital to break up with her. A few hours later, his girlfriend jumped off a 3-story building, successfully killing herself. The crazy things happening in the lives of others are always baffling to me. It's happening all the time, everywhere, and we have no idea. Story 10. The amount of energy and emissions that artificial intelligence is going to require and generate over the next 10 years completely undoes all of the environmental advancements we have made in the past 10 years. Story 11. Children of opiate addicts and overdose victims are growing into adults after a lifetime of being ignored and abandoned. Everyone is wondering why young people are so sick. We have the statistics. Millions of people addicted to substances and extreme substances that obliterate parental engagement is starting to show. I'm one of those who flooded into foster care in the 2010s. Now, even more parents are overdosing or have moved to fentanyl from traditional hard substances. They give their kids computers and then leave them until they are 18, if they don't abandon them physically. Those kids are becoming sick adults and think they are flawed when they have been consistently disadvantaged their entire life. That adult who never feeds themselves well, doesn't pursue any of their goals or ideas, never spends on their needs, and never plans for the future is a child who was ignored and taught their ideas and health weren't valuable or worth pursuing. They weren't taught how to strategically plan and coordinate a project. Sick adults are child victims who didn't get help. And we are now seeing their apathy and illness rise in real time. Story 12. There's a mining company preparing to blow a hole in a pristine piece of desert in Nevada. Right next to that hole is a 10-acre spot where a tiny desert plant called Teams buckwheat is eking out a living. There are 50% fewer Teams buckwheat plants now than there were a decade ago because half the population disappeared virtually overnight. The Bureau of Land Management, which will ultimately permit the mining company, said the plants likely disappeared because of rodents, although the rodents chose an odd time to decimate a plant they've lived next to for hundreds of years. This little plant grows nowhere else on Earth. It has evolved to thrive in that soil, heavily laced with lithium. And because lithium extraction is more important, that little plant will likely become extinct. Story 13. Just how badly our kids need more support at home so they can do well at school. Just how far behind socially and academically our kids are because they do not get enough help at home. I'm a 5th grade teacher. Story 14. We are running out of helium. Story 15. The Supreme Court is essentially on the ballot, but most people don't think about that. They think they are just voting for president, but the balance of power on the court is what is truly at stake. Several justices will likely retire in the next 4 years, and the president appoints them. Story 16. Some red blood cell is doing its daily routine. A thankless job that his boss doesn't even notice most of the time. He will never receive benefits, workers' rights, sick days, or the ability to transfer to another position. He will never see the light of day and will never have the pleasure of meeting a woman. Yet he remains steadfast in his duty, never wavering until he figuratively draws his last breath. This blood cell is a hero among a trillion heroes, holding the line just so his boss can smoke weed and drink soda, squandering his hard work. His life will end in tragedy only to be reborn again and again countless times until his entire world is eroded by the sands of time. Story 17. In terms of popular culture, we're getting more fragmented than ever. With algorithms dictating more and more of our personal feeds each day, it gets harder and harder to have a TV series, movie, or song that defines a time period. In previous times, it was much easier to do, but in today's world, it gets harder to have a stronger media monoculture. Story 18. There is a global sand shortage. It sounds strange, but sand is in high demand for making concrete, and it is becoming a real problem since we cannot just use desert sand. It makes you wonder what other basic materials we might run low on, especially with how fast cities are expanding. Story 19. Texas is trying to execute an innocent man based on outdated science. Story 20. Scientists have discovered a cause of lupus and a possible way to reverse it. Story 21. The company I founded had its best year ever. Long story short, a child of an immigrant becomes a licensed architect, opens up their own company, works by themselves, and breaks into the middle class. What's left of it, that is, feels good. Story 22. Syria. 1. We have Turkey actively fighting the Kurds in northern Syria and working closely with Russia to do it. Turkey is a North Atlantic Treaty Organization member helping Russia, and it just bought a missile defense system from Russia. The United States last week bombed a Syrian airport. This is unusual in that the United States normally only fights the Islamic State in Syria. This was against a Syrian government-controlled airport. Iran is actively funding Hezbollah in their fight against Israel. Hezbollah, who also supports the Syrian government, has fighters in Syria. Israel has bombed multiple targets in Syria, including the capital. All of this is like a quagmire of alliances, and it looks like the Middle East is just going to keep burning. Story 23. Forests have started releasing more carbon dioxide than they use. Insects are going extinct in the United States, and cyanobacteria and algae populations in the oceans have collapsed. Story 24. I don't know about every other region, but eastern Pennsylvania, USA, is in a major drought right now. It's been over a month without even a drop of rain. We are in a major no-burn advisory because of the falling leaves and drought. Even a little campfire can spread and burn down an entire forest and take every nearby town with it. Story 25. The Kremlin is actively compromising very powerful Americans to get them to work against the best interests of the country. This has gone on for years and is now out in the open. Most people do not know about it, though, because it sounds crazy and therefore the news will not report it. Also, journalists are just as afraid of being thrown out of a window as anyone. Story 26. We are well past the tipping point of some form of environmental collapse. The mathematics used to create the models did not account for forests no longer absorbing carbon dioxide as expected, and did not account for large quantities of methane in melted permafrost occurring in Siberia and Alaska. Methane, which retains heat 10 times more than carbon dioxide but dissolves much faster, increases heat. This heat then adds more fresh water into the oceans, which affects the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, tied to weather patterns all over the world. Story 27. While most Americans are bickering over who should be president for the next few years, up in space is a star called T Coronii Borealis that astronomers say is about to explode. Seeing a star go nova from Earth is an incredibly rare event. Story 28. Under our current economic system in the United States, young people who go to university are saddled with debt, essentially a mortgage with no house to show for it. People who do not go to university, sometimes, even if they learn a great trade, cannot afford a house. A society that cannibalizes its own young is doomed. Story 29. Folks think the unidentified aerial phenomenon is still a joke even after United States military chiefs of staff have gone on public record acknowledging that we have documented evidence of objects in our local airspace, over military bases, points of interest, and war zones that behave in ways that go against our current understanding of physics. This is not a call for or reason to panic, but I wish more people acknowledged it for the truth that it is. We do not know what they are with any kind of certainty. However, it should have people looking up or asking more questions of our government, seeing as they have no way to explain what they are or how they operate, but have stated they are a security threat. Story 30. In the United States, but also worldwide, cancer is being diagnosed in the emergency room at a higher rate than ever before. Some studies suggest up to 40%. It is typically advanced and, in part, a lasting consequence of the pandemic. People did not seek medical care when they should have and learned to live with or accept symptoms until they could not anymore. Story 31. So it's changing a lot now, but in the very recent past, as recent as the 2010s or so, there didn't used to be cameras at drive-thrus. So how did they know there was someone at a drive-thru? There are plates under the concrete where the speaker is. So when a car stops on the plates, it sends a signal to a headset to a worker inside. That's how they take your order at a drive-thru, not by cameras but by plates underground. Story 32. Not to be the Debbie Downer here, but utter and complete social upheaval brought on by ecological and climate collapse. We are not ready for the complete catastrophe that is just around the corner. News sources are barely reporting on the dangers of cascading systems, let alone those that have already collapsed. Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, blue ocean event, natural carbon sink overload, soil quality, methane, ocean acidification, wildlife extinction. The list goes on and on. We are not ready for the hell on earth that awaits us, and it is going to happen much sooner than later. Estimates of 2100 or end of century are straight up false hope at this point. Story 33. The world is losing 2.5 tons of soil for every person on the planet each year. Every year, the amount of soil loss is increasing. By 2040, famines that kill hundreds of millions will be the norm. Story 34. This is super obscure, but I hear the United States is having an election for their next leader or something. It's apparently a big deal over there, but you'd hardly know it unless you're into that kind of niche culture. Story 35. Every 11 years, we roll a 1 in 100 dice, and if we roll a 1, we will be thrown back 150 years. We are nearing the middle of our sun's solar cycle, which occurs every 11 years, and the chances of our planet being hit by a Carrington-level solar event are technically 3 times more likely, roughly a 1.88% chance. It doesn't seem like a lot, but the amount of starvation caused by losing the power grid of half the planet would be unfathomable. People are scared of meteors with a 1 in 100,000 chance of impacting Earth, but that would be merciful compared to the societal collapse we would face. Story 36. Right now, artificial intelligence is advancing so fast that half the stuff we think of as science fiction is basically yesterday's news. Most people have no idea how much it's changing industries, jobs, and maybe even how we interact with technology daily. We might all be asking Siri and Alexa for life advice before we know it. Story 37. Extremely high commercial loan interest rates or notes are being called due. It is something the media does not cover since residential real estate comes first. You have to dig for that type of information. Story 38. There is a horrific genocide happening in Sudan, and it has been going on for a long time. The United States Department of Agriculture Wildlife Program is killing wild horses and other animals at the request of cattle ranchers. Story 39. Upcoming hearing on unidentified aerial phenomena in Congress on November 13th. There is a bipartisan movement to disclose unidentified aerial phenomena information going on right now that gets almost no mainstream attention. Long gone are the days of Farmer John UFO stories. We have witnesses and informed individuals ranging from Congress, jet fighter pilots, intelligence officers, former Central Intelligence Agency directors, admirals, and former astronauts. Multiple whistleblowers are coming under oath or already have to testify about government programs for retrieval or reverse engineering. Millions of taxpayer dollars have been poured into these programs for decades with no congressional oversight. The public should be viewing this as a huge unconstitutional issue that needs to be taken seriously. There is tons of evidence using multiple sensor signal acquisition corroborating visual reports, radar, forward-looking infrared, video, and eyewitness testimony.